Episode of 2022. Dr. Wald, it's good to be back. How are you doing today?
Yeah, it's a brand new year.
Is it though?
Exciting, is it though? Yeah,
Is it feels it feels like last year.
it does. It does. It
No,
really
it is
does.
it is a new year, new sense of optimism, new sense of wonder as we conquer 2020 part 2. So here we
Yeah.
go.
I think we're at 2020 part 3
Part 3.
now. Part part 92.
Yeah, my favorite was the meme from this has been an Affleck meme where he's taking the cigarette and he's looks stressed out and it says when you realize that 2022 is pronounced 2020 2022.
Oh
So
God.
that's
Ah.
my favorites. Okay. We have a lot of things that happened over the past whatever it's been 3 to 4 weeks since we talked. It's been a while, I guess.
Yeah.
So oil is still flowing. That's one thing. And Europe is still getting colder. So those things haven't changed.
Yeah.
Um
Apparently, New York is going to be in for it, or they're already getting very cold temperatures there, and they're headed for more cold temperatures. So it'll be
yeah.
interesting to see what happens when the center of the world, which is, the Northeast,
Mhm.
experiences cold temperatures, and Europe does.
There you go. And this is Derek Campbell. I met Derek. I was a moderator on a panel at the U.S. Africa Energy Summit a few weeks ago,
Ooh.
and he was one of our distinguished panelists. And so
Welcome to the podcast.
yes, welcome, Derek. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Okay, so let's talk about. Let's see here. We're going to BCG. I think that's their first
Yeah.
appearance on the show here. How institutional investors see the future of oil and gas. If it's not bullish, they're not seeing it correctly, Dr. Wald. That's what I say.
It's interesting because I picked this up because later on we're having someone from the Dallas Fed come on to talk about the latest energy survey, where we get kind of a sense of how the executives from a lot of the E&Ps in basically like in Texas see the future of oil and gas. And so I thought it'd be interesting to compare that a little bit to how institutional investors see it, especially like oil prices and stuff like that. And it's kind of an interesting survey here from Boston Consulting Group. Happen to know one of the people who worked on the survey, Jamie Webster. So give him a little shout out. Thanks for
Hmm.
bringing this to my attention. But some of the interesting things are that notice. So first of all, energy company stocks are up. Um, and it says approximately 70% of respondents expect oil prices to remain above $60 per barrel through 2024. So that's their I guess that's what they're operating off of. It'll be
Hmm.
interesting when we look at what E&Ps think
Right.
oil prices will be, see how that compares. But that's significantly higher than they thought in 2021, when they only thought the price would be between 40 and 60. So
Mhm.
definitely more optimism, though I would say they don't. I mean, that doesn't tell us whether or not they think oil will hit 100, but could.
Yeah, and it's another thing I thought was interesting is I'm trying to figure out where I moved my mouse. Okay, yeah. More broadly, 80%. This is from the piece. More broadly, 80% of investors want clarity on companies' plans for the energy transition. Now, the problem there is that that's a tough. It's tough to say what your plans are today. With,
Yeah.
I mean, think about the moving legislative goalposts we've seen in the U.S. And so you start talking about your
Yeah.
plans. Well, what is the legislative policy of the U.S. going to be towards oil and gas? Because that will impact how you're going to tackle energy transition issues.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's interesting though? I wish they would say like why. Why is it that they want clarity on this? Is it because they are trying to sell ESG funds to their clients, and so they feel like if they have more information about these energy transition plans, that they can give them better ESG ratings and sell, because remember this, and sell them. Like now that I've looked into this whole ESG thing, I've become very I see everything in terms of like this is a product that institutional investors sell to their clients, like fund managers are selling. And
Oh
so
yeah.
the more information, and studies have shown that the more information that energy firms disclose about their ESG stuff, the higher ratings they get. It doesn't mean that like it's almost like it doesn't really matter what it is they're saying. It's just like the more information that they
Mhm.
give, the higher they get rated. So maybe that's one of the reasons why they're looking. Excuse me, they're looking for this. They want to know. They want to be able to include more of these firms in their ESG packages that they're selling.
Yeah,
So
and to Derek's
that's a cynical
yeah,
me.
well, I mean, to Derek's point, though, one of the things we talked about on this podcast many times, and he brought up at the panel specifically was, you look at a place like Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, all the oil they have there, and so you start talking about this piece says that, and again I move my mouse, but it said that 2/3, I think, believe, yeah, here it is. Nearly 2/3 of investors say that peak oil demand will occur by 2030. Okay, there's no chance. Like there is almost no chance that that's going to
Wait,
happen.
they said only 2/3,
Nearly two
because
thirds.
it's not like an only two. It's like a
No, nearly 2/3. Nearly two
nearly
thirds.
2/3.
Yeah.
Okay,
And so
they've been reading the New York Times too much. Bloomberg.
yeah,
Stop reading
2/3.
Bloomberg and
Yeah.
New York Times,
Well,
guys.
yeah, I don't understand that, and that's part of the thing is you look at these emerging markets where what's happening there, as their economies continue to grow. It's hard to imagine that we're seeing some of these narratives kind of reset, and I suspect we're going to see the narrative around peak oil reset. It's got to reset here the next year or two. We already blew past the hey, we've hit peak oil in 2020. Remember that was
Oh yeah,
2021. Like that was the new number. It's 2021, and then now it's like
yeah. If
well,
like COVID killed half the people in the world, then maybe you could hit peak oil in 2020.
right,
But
and
it didn't. Oh well.
yeah, and so yeah, we agree, Derek, that the emerging market is where you're going to see a lot of growth demand coming in the future,
Yeah.
and a lot of barrels will come on the market there as well. I think as they get their infrastructure
Yeah.
and investment built out.
I mean, so far, from what I've been seeing, almost all of this year isn't that old, but all of the new discovery announcements have been in like Guyana and there. I think maybe there was like one announced from Norway, but
Yeah. Okay.
so
Here we go. Let's go to our next piece here. New York City. I'm sorry, New York governor. Sorry, governor.
New York State.
New York State called for an end to the use of natural gas in new buildings. This will be by 2027. 2027.
Yeah.
I mean, are we not
New
looking? I mean, New
governor of
York
New
and
York.
Europe is like right there on the map. You know, they're basically. Are we not watching what's happening there?
Yeah, she says the governor's blueprint also sets a goal of 2 million electrified homes by the end of the decade. So, yeah, then when we have an energy, they do realize that, like, well, I haven't looked it up recently, but like a lot of their energy comes from natural gas. Anyway, now it's interesting because I actually did a bit of a research into this issue in New York City. When they decided, so when Bill de Blasio was still the mayor, he decided that stores could not use, restaurants were getting these propane heaters for their outside dining, and then he's like, no, you can't do that anymore, it's too dangerous. And so I looked into this, and he's like, you can have natural gas hookup heaters. And it turns out that so propane's actually not dangerous, but it turns out that New York City actually has a serious problem because a lot of its natural gas hookups are like not safe, and there's a lot of like bad stuff that goes on where people like try to tap into them and they create very unsafe conditions. So to me, it seems like this rule saying, oh, you have to have these natural gas heaters is actually just begging for more of these like bad hookups and potential explosions. But I can kind of see why, like, a lot of the infrastructure in New York City is really crumbling. I can kind of see why you might want to maybe, I don't know, I would say like maybe a temporary ban on new hookups until you can like maybe replace all the bad ones that are there. I mean, you're always hearing like there's always some like big explosion or like a natural gas line blew up and killed these people or destroyed this home. And a lot of times it's because there was, funky bad stuff going on. But it's just like I don't know why they keep doubling down with this. Like you have to electrify homes. First of all, if you're talking like New York State, you're talking like a place like Buffalo. I know they claim that those heaters are rated for those temperatures, but they're not. I know this because I lived in Massachusetts, and we had to have electric heating in where I lived, and it sucked. Like it really, really sucked. You cannot. It did not work without a second source. You needed to have like floorboard heating or something else in addition. So just because like, and they're very expensive to install, and then the idea is you make the money back because it's not that expensive to run, except, oh, remember, electricity prices are going way up because where are we getting our electricity? Natural gas, because we switched so much over to natural gas, which is better than coal, but natural gas prices go up and then your electricity prices go up. So it's just, I don't know, I just think it's not, whatever, it's not a good plan. And can't we learn from Europe and not do the same messy bad things here?
Yeah, and I would love to get on an electrical engineer or whomever who looks at these large grid issues and help just understand, because I'm an idiot. So help me understand how we're going to, like, are we have to lay a bunch more lines? Like, how does this work out practically? Because you say, hey, we want to electrify, we want to put more cars, we want to put more electrification on the grid. Like, how
Yeah.
practically will this work out? Because I don't know how that works it out practically. I mean, to
Yeah.
me, it seems that there's kind of a disconnect there of I mean, and maybe the wiring that we have can handle that much more, but I don't think so.
No. Also, is 2 million electrified homes really that many?
What's that?
Like,
Oh yeah, a
she
million.
says
Yeah,
she wants to, like, that's by the end of the decade. It's now, like, that doesn't seem like a particularly ambitious plan to me.
yeah.
It's just talking about new homes. Are there really that many people who are moving into New York State?
Mhm. I don't know. Maybe
I
that's one of the numbers.
I just like
No,
thinking,
people
I
are
was
moving
like,
out.
it's like that's not exactly a particularly ambitious green infrastructure plan. Apparently, they have a 2019 law on the books requiring the state to reach net zero emissions by 2020. Oh, and a zero emission power grid by 2040. How's that gonna
Mm,
work for
mm,
New York?
Not.
What does zero emission mean? Does so it doesn't say net zero emissions. It says zero emissions. So I think net zero usually means you can buy offsets.
Hmm. Hmm.
Zero emission means
Yeah, you don't
no
live.
fossil fuel. They build in nuclear plants.
People aren't living there. Is what it means. Yeah, that's.
Oh yes, there we go. We're just gonna get everyone to move out of the state.
Okay. Oh gracious. Okay, let's talk about Kazakhstan. A lot's happened in Kazakhstan. It's made the news. It doesn't get a lot of news attention, but when you have a uprising and a coup, civil war, bombs, fighting, riots in the street, etc., you can make the news. And so Kazakhstan has earned a spot on the Wall Street Journal. Dr. Wald, is this a big
Yeah.
deal?
Um. So I think it's a bigger deal politically than it is energy wise. Also, can we say that now, like, hopefully everyone knows where the H in Kazakhstan goes? I don't know. I've always had trouble remembering where the H goes. I always want to put it like KH instead of in the beginning instead of in the middle
Yes, me
when
as
I
well.
spell it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but
And
so
no, I'm not promising I'll remember in 6 months where the H
uh,
goes.
so it's interesting because I think the oil world is interested in what's going on in Kazakhstan because Kazakhstan is not it's not like a Saudi style, size or an Iraq size producer, but it's not an itty bitty producer. I
Hmm.
mean, it's producing over 1 million barrels a day. It's part of OPEC plus, so it's not insignificant. And also, there are a lot of companies that are doing these working on Kazakhstan's oil. Um, I personally didn't wasn't really up on my Kazakhstani politics and stuff, but it did seem to me like an interesting issue, particularly because of Russia and proximity to Russia and whether Russia is going to get more involved in Kazakhstan, especially at the same time as it's got this whole thing going on in Ukraine. Apparently, they also produce 40% of the world's uranium, which seems to me to be maybe potentially a bigger issue than the oil production. Apparently, there was some slowdown in oil output from one of the fields because workers were striking or they were blocking trains from getting out. But now that does seem to be uh, resolved, and oil production is going as it should. But I spoke to some people who are more up on Central European politics than I, am, and I learned some interesting things about it. It seems, because I was wondering, is this like a real kind of revolution type thing, or is this just people, rioting because they don't like the prices of things, which is a totally legitimate. Not that's not a reason to riot, but like generally you need to have some sort of like sustained like ideology if you're actually going to try to like overthrow the government and have a revolution. Um, and so I learned some interesting things. So apparently there was this president Nazarbayev, and he kind of left. He was very authoritarian, and he put in this other guy Tokayev, but he kept all of his own people. And so Tokayev's the president, but he can't really do all that much. And people were starting to complain about things and marching in the streets. And this person at least says, or says that from people who are closer to Central Asian politics, that that Tokayev was using this as the opportunity to get rid of Nazarbayev's people and put it in his own people. So it's like maybe a clash of two different administrations trying to get a grip on power. Um, and that Tokayev may be calling in these Russian troops or inviting them in to cement his control versus Nazarbayev. Um, anyway, I'm not gonna. I don't want to admit to having any great expertise here, but it does seem like there's a lot more to the internal political scene than I think a lot of us are aware of.
Yeah, and I think it does highlight to your point earlier, which is that Kazakhstan, while they're not the greatest, most prolific oil producer in the world, they do have a stake in the game, and they kind of get overlooked. I mean, we don't talk about them ever on the show, because they get overlooked
Yeah.
quite often. And so here was a chance that you kind of were reminded, oh yeah, that this is something. But it also kind of goes to show that um, when you think of these countries that are producing and kind of small ones that have kind of gotten left off, it reminded me of Venezuela, because we hadn't talked about Venezuela so long. It's like,
Yeah.
golly, here's Kazakhstan making news for oil, and we're not talking about Venezuela. That's it's a really weird paradigm. I think we've kind of normalized that Venezuela is out of the picture, but historically, that's just it's so weird that you're talking about other countries, and Venezuela can't even get a headline, and Kazakhstan is now in the news for oil. And when's the last time we talked about Venezuela?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's also interesting because they have a lot of like direct pipelines that go to China. And so,
Mm-hmm.
with Venezuela, everything Venezuela basically does get to put on ship. But here, like Kazakhstan's got oil going through
Yeah.
pipelines to China and all sorts of interesting things. I actually think that the uranium story could turn out to be more of a bigger story than the oil story because they sell to utilities in the U.S. and other Western countries and China, and nuclear is a big thing. If the people causing issues and whatnot really want to hit the government where it hurts, they're probably going to have to attack oil, but I would also hit them in uranium because you know I think people are starting to realize that nuclear power is a necessity.
Well, that's the thing I was going to ask you about is so you kind of have this weird deal where Kazakhstan's making more news than Venezuela, which is kind of weird for oil and gas. But I don't follow uranium prices that closely, and so I saw that they are spiking. Is this something that they can balance out a little quicker than you can with oil? Is it something where with oil it's like, oh, we're going to increase production here, but I would imagine with the uranium mining, it's probably a lot slower of a process.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Says a lightly processed form of uranium known as U-308 was expected to change hands above $46 a pound on Thursday. That's up from 45.25 on Wednesday and 42 at the start of the year. That's not a huge jump, but yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely. I mean, it does seem like you also have to refine the uranium a little bit before you're selling it. I don't know. It says the unrest could affect uranium deliveries if it isn't resolved quickly. Traders and mining companies said most mining in Kazakhstan is carried out by a process called in situ leaching, which requires a steady supply of pipes to well lines that are drilled in the ground, as well as sulfuric acid to pump uranium to the surface. Gosh, that sounds challenging. Apparently, uranium prices are more than 50% higher than they were 12 months ago, despite the fact that Germany has shut like all of its nuclear power
Yeah, that's
plants.
what I'm about to say. That it seems like and I haven't looked at a chart, but just from reading the headlines, it feels like nuclear is getting shut down. So you would think, well, I guess if it's getting shut down, even though there's less of demand, there could be less people actually mining for it, and so when you have to mine for it, it's more expensive because you're not
Yeah.
really people are charging for it. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think this is a situation that should definitely keep an eye on, even if we haven't seen an impact to oil. I mean, I think I don't know. I kind of compare it to like if you're thinking about the Iranian Revolution, like slowdowns and strikes in the oil sector were really key to the process in terms of the Iranian Revolution. And if you're going to, if you want to hit the government where it hurts, you've got to hit the energy exports. It's like for a country that where they're relying on it, especially at a time now when prices are good. So, I think if there is going to be some kind of political upheaval there, um, you not that I'm like advising people on how to violently overthrow government, but if I was,
If you were, that's a
I'd
different
say
podcast.
you got to find a way to hit the oil exports.
Speaking of people and violently overthrowing their governments, um, what is the latest with Iran?
I don't know. I don't think they're coming back online anytime soon. There are talks in Vienna.
Well,
That's
because
like,
you think about it, if you have turmoil in Kazakhstan, you have Venezuela that's kind of off the map. Iran could play a more pivotal role.
yeah, that's not. Yeah, I mean, they definitely could. It would be. I mean, if we did see a political shift in Kazakhstan, it would be interesting if they like allied closer with Iran. At one point, I think Kazakhstan was actually part of the Persian Empire, or part of Kazakhstan, maybe. In
Yeah,
case
all the
that was
Stein,
like a really, really, really
yeah,
long time ago, though.
yeah, all the Stein countries they kind of run together. I can't remember who came from where and
So there's
what.
Kazakhstan. That used to be a Soviet. Well, a lot of them used to be Soviet socialist
Yeah, a lot
republics.
of
So
it
there's
did. Yeah,
Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan. But that's not a stan.
no, you got Turkmenistan,
Turkmenistan
Afghanistan,
and Tajikistan.
Tajikistan. Yeah,
Tajikistan, yeah. I used to, when I taught history, I used to teach a history of Iran class. I used to make my students memorize the stans. Yeah. So I'm looking at my map. I have a map. I could take it down and show the folks, or we could look at my
your
trusty
handy globe.
my handy globe. So Turkmenistan connects to Iran, and then next to it you've got Uzbekistan. Kazakhstan, I think, is farther north. Yeah, Kazakhstan is north. Okay, so it's Iran, and then Turkmenistan, then Uzbekistan, then Kazakhstan. So it's not that far, and they all share the Caspian Sea. They all have well, Uzbekistan does not have a port on the Caspian Sea. But yeah, so learn your stans, people. Could be interesting.
Okay, and I think our guest is ready. So let's.
Excellent.
Here we go. Can you hear us? Well, we can't hear you.
You may be muted.
Let's see here. Let him get that figured out. No. There's a little gear button on the bottom. I don't know, Ellen can probably tell you better because she sees the same screen as you do.
Yeah.
He's not muted. He's on the wrong mic, it looks like, because he's not muted.
Oh.
Can you guys hear me?
Yay! There we go. There we
Hey!
go. Awesome.
Thanks
Sorry
for
about that.
joining us. Hi.
Thank you.
I'm Ellen. This is
Hi,
Ryan.
Ellen.
Well, introduce yourself real quick and we'll get into it.
Fantastic. So my name is Kunal Patel. I'm a senior business economist with the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. For anyone on the call that's not as familiar with the Federal Reserve, we promote a strong financial system, strong economic growth. We're focused on the 11th district. That includes Texas, parts of New Mexico, and parts of southern New Mexico. I work on our energy team within the research department, and I help run, which we'll talk about here today, the Dallas Fed Energy Survey. The Energy Survey is a quarterly survey of about 200 upstream oil and gas firms located or headquartered in our district. They operate regionally, nationally, internationally. We started the survey back in 2016. Main goal is to better understand the opportunities and challenges that firms are facing. Results are available on our website. And if you're an executive in our region and you haven't joined, please feel free to come down to our website and sign up.
Okay, well, let's start there. You said you are surveying for people that kind of what they say the market is and the challenges that they're facing. So, what does your recent report indicate? What are some of the challenges that people are telling you guys about?
Definitely. So, the main headline we put out is that activity in the oil and gas space continues to expand. This is primarily the upstream sector, which is drilling and completing wells, so on and so forth. Some of the challenges, it's something that's across all industries. Cost pressures have come up the last 3 quarters straight, whether it's your input cost to operate leases, cost to run your leases. Overall, costs are continue to increase. Some of the other insights to highlight from our recent release, employment continues to expand. It's just not as robust as what we saw, let's say 2010 to 2014 or even 2017 to 2019, but employment is improving. Most of it is on the oilfield services side. Production continues to increase, outlooks continue to improve, uncertainty is remaining unchanged. I think a lot of that has to do with this uncertainty piece. The uncertainty, we collect comments from our executives. These get published on the website. Generally expect about 30 to 50 comments from our executives. The regulatory uncertainty is a big piece of it. Other uncertainty is COVID-19, uncertainty around trying to get additional capital. I guess one good thing to know is that oil and gas executives expect the price of oil to end this year at $75 per barrel. That's a little bit higher than during the survey period where it was about 71. Highest forecast was 125. So we have seen oil take up in recent days. It's just that the average is $75 per barrel.
One quick question on the employment. Is the employment, you said it's kind of not tracking like it is historically. Does the survey indicate, is that because of advancements in technology? Is it hard to find labor? Is it that the labor costs aren't attracting people back? Is there any read on that?
So great question, Ryan. So like in our third quarter, we did ask our oilfield services firm specifically, are you having trouble hiring just in general? And of the firms that are looking to hire, I don't have the exact percentage in front of me, but about 2/3 said, yes, we are having trouble. And then the most picked reason of why they're having trouble is there's just no applicants out there. They're having trouble finding applicants to fill positions. The other reason is, employees looking or potential applicants looking for higher pay than, what they can pay. But the number one reason was just we just cannot find the employees that we're looking for. Just like you mentioned, there's continuing improvements in drilling and completion efficiency. While the survey does not specifically track it. We do go out and have various sources, and yes, there continues to be improvement in terms of drilling and completing wells. The completion times continue to come down, drilling times continue to come down. Firms are becoming more efficient. We did people did talk about pad drilling a while back, but there's still more and more wells being developed on a pad, and these pad sizes are getting bigger and bigger. And so, without a doubt, there's just hasn't been as big of a need on the oilfield services side for as many employees because there is increased efficiency. Now, while we do run less rigs today, we still are drilling and completing more wells per those rigs. And then on the E&P side, there continues to be consolidation. And so while there isn't as much, the indexes show that those insights are just from a broader level view. One executive did say that the employment picture today looks a little bit better than it did 3 months ago. It's a little hard to say what exactly is driving that, but they did mention that it feels a little bit better today than it did 3 months ago. But again, this is not something that's it's across all industries. I think that across many industries, employers are having trouble finding employees.
So I love reading this survey. I especially love the comment section because it really gives such an interesting window into what executives are thinking about, especially in this very vibrant area of oil producing. And one of the interesting things that I noticed as the difference between the comments now and maybe the comments from, I think maybe it was the Q2 survey, is that OPEC doesn't seem to appear as a cause of uncertainty. We're still seeing, regulatory uncertainty from the Biden administration, COVID, like you mentioned, but whereas before firms were very concerned about, OPEC potentially, just like decided to overproduce and drop the price, and that didn't appear. And so I was wondering if what you think of that, or is that something you also noticed?
Dr. Wall, it's great. I actually did notice that exact same thing because there's a lot of comments this time around the regulatory uncertainty, and almost there very few, if any, around OPEC. And we did ask, so we have a question where we ask timely questions. We call our special questions. And I think in the third quarter of 2020, we asked, do you believe that OPEC's ability to influence the market is going to be greater than it did in the past? And 2/3 or 3/4 said yes. And then we saw comments after that of, "Hey, we're a little bit worried that if OPEC opens up the taps, our business is very much dependent on what OPEC chooses to do." I think right now it's well known that OPEC is increasing production, and prices have stabilized in the $70 to $80 band, and so I think that they feel a little bit more confident. We'll have to see how these comments show up in future quarters. I think in the third quarter there were still some comments though around the price uncertainty. It is very hard to predict prices. We do ask our executives about price expectations. That's for us to get an idea of what they're thinking. But I think anybody in the industry knows that it's just hard to predict prices.
Yeah, I love seeing what they think the prices will be and kind of comparing it to say what banks are saying the price will be, because it's interesting to see. But I like more not what they think the price will be, but where they're set, what price they're using to basically make their budgets, because that's even more conservative than their prices. And so I thought it was very interesting. I think that a very common answer was like $65 a barrel, which is basically like where they're setting their budgets at, and how if you compare that to what the financial firms are saying about where they think oil prices can go, it's a big difference. And I wonder if that may potentially explain some of the reticence to drill more, because they are having these much more conservative price forecasts.
And I'm glad you brought it up. Every fourth quarter of the year since I think it's 2018 or so, we've been asking our executives what price they're using for their budgets. And I think for 2019 and for 2020, they started the year thinking 55. Obviously, 2020 was a year where they likely revised that $55 number. For 2021, they used 45, but the price of oil then was about 50. And this year, with prices 70 to 75, they chose 65. I think while we don't have any comments specifically on it, the general feeling from myself is they're being conservative, right? They're choosing a price that's a little bit lower than their current price, so that their drilling and completion program is aligned with being a little bit conservative. Also the futures curve is in backwardation, and so there are some reasons to be a little bit more conservative. I think the hesitation to drill, though, generally the comments seem to suggest, especially if you're a public firm, ESG investors. We did get some comments around that. We did ask a special question, which was, what is your firm's top priority for 2022? And this was only for the E&P firms. We provided them with 8 different options to pick from, but we did include an other with a box to fill in what their other was. We took the results and segregated them or separate them. That's a better word, separated into small firms and large firms. Small firms are 10,000 barrels a day or less. Large firms are 10,000 barrels a day or more. We believe that about 80% of the production in the U.S. comes from large firms. So the large firms said, number one thing we're trying to do in 2022 is reduce debt. Second largest picked one was grow production. However, for the smaller firms, 57% said we're looking to grow production. And so there's different ways you can kind of think about it. Like they're looking to increase. A lot of it are the smaller firms. It's a lot easier for a smaller firm to grow production in some ways because they don't have existing declines to manage. Larger firms, let's say you've got 100,000 barrels a day of production. Well, your production is going to decline 30 to 40% if you're involved if you're doing horizontal drilling. And so harder to grow production. A lot of the big firms are looking to prioritize reducing debt. And I think investors are looking for firms to be, return capital, reduce debt, grow reasonably, whether it's flat or slight increase. And so I would say that the hesitation tends to be very much ESG related, investor demands, because we've seen back in 2017 and 2018 and even 2019 just strong growth in production. But I think that this year you're still going to see some amount of growth. For 2021, let's call it, most people would say exit to exit 500,000 barrels per day. It's about a 4% growth rate, which is still modest. And going into this year, maybe we'll see something similar. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I thought this was one of the most interesting questions and responses of the whole survey. Was this, what's your what's your top priority? And now I'm actually looking at the breakdown even more to see what other things that they said. It's interesting that of all firms, 11 said they want to acquire assets. Or 11% want to acquire assets, but 5% want to divest of assets. So if you're looking to acquire assets, I guess you're going to have to not look to buy them from somebody else, because there aren't quite as many people looking to divest assets. Although the large firms definitely responded that they want to divest more assets. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, and no one said they're looking to reduce costs. I guess
I've seen that. I've seen that comment come up everywhere that, hey, on this survey, nobody's looking to reduce costs. And it's really hard to say why that is. I think we did ask this question specifically in 2020. I'd actually have to pull up the results to see what I can even do it. But I think that there were more people that said that they're looking to reduce cost back then. It could be that in this higher priced environment, that doesn't become the number one focus. Maybe it's their second or third one. The reason why the question in many ways is your top one is because many of these may be priorities. It's just that it depends on what is the top one. And back in 2000, let's say third quarter 2020, I'm looking at it right now, it was something like 7 or 8% said reduce costs. It was still lower than many of the other ones. But I think that firms are still interested in reducing costs. It just doesn't end up being the number one thing. And it could be that they've already reduced costs a lot, and it might be a little bit more challenging to cut even further.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. I mean, every firm wants to reduce costs, right, but maybe it's just not number one.
So I know we are up against the clock here on your time. I do have one parting question for you, though. As I'm reading the comments here, and I noticed there was a comment about someone said that they're a very small business and the insurance requirements are very high. And we talked about employment constraints. Do you guys read these comments and then help formulate future questions? It's like if you have a bunch of people saying one thing in the comments, does that maybe gauge where some of your questions for the next survey will be?
I would say that we use a variety of different ways of formulating our questions. We do. So we don't only. So the nice thing about the comments is it provides that color. Mm-hmm. And so then we are always in tuned on, those opportunities and challenges that firms are having. On top of that, we also reach out to executives in our district. We have roundtables, just like everyone. We read through a lot of the news sources that many people see, and then from there we try to come up with the best question to ask. We don't ask too many questions because executives have not an incredible amount of time for a survey, so we try to ask the best questions possible. But definitely the comments really provide that color, and hopefully we feel that like we're asking the right questions. I think that when you look through the results of the survey and then you think about what's happening in the industry, it seems to follow very closely. But the comments mainly provides that additional color. When it comes to special question formulation, I don't know if that's the primary look at it, but it does at least make sure it definitely informs our views.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, we will link to this in the show notes. Where do you want to tell people to go to follow y'all's work, and what might you have coming out in the near future?
Definitely. So our results for the survey are available on our public website, dallasfed.org. Our first quarter release will be on, I believe it's March 23rd, 9:30 a.m. Central Time. It'll be available on our public website. I think that the big thing that one item that everyone is really interested from the survey is our break evens or oil price break evens. What price do E&P firms need to profitably drill a new well? And so that comes out every first quarter of the year. And so definitely check it out when it's released.
Okay, wonderful. We'd love to get you back on to talk about that one when it comes out.
Yeah.
And we will link to all this in the show notes. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank
Happy
you.
to join again. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Dr. Wald. Let's see here. Yeah, I saw in one of the comments, and if I can see it pulled up. It was one of the service firms. It was a hotshot operator, and I think it was a
Yeah.
lady, and she was saying that her insurance requirements are that of the big competitors, and so she's getting priced out of the market. And so it's interesting. That's why I was asking the question about how they formulate their
Yeah.
questions, because if you're saying you're struggling to find people, and these companies have sometimes huge insurance requirements, and so it would be interesting to see if they would reduce their insurance requirements to help bring on more vendors, right? Because I mean, there's been times where we've had to pay $70, $80, $90,000 a year for professional liability. Yeah, and it's not even that we need that much coverage, but it's because we were lumped in under this certain category, and so that's what. So yes, a lot of insurance stuff is crazy. So if you're listening,
Sounds like you need a direct line to the actuaries who are putting these insurance and the risk managers who are like informing the actuaries of the insurance things.
So yeah, I read that comment. And I felt her pain. I think it was a lady. I felt her pain. It's like, wow, here you are, saying you need help, but your insurance requirements. And one more on my soapbox. If you'd guarantee people the work, if they got the insurance, they'd get the insurance, but they won't. So you kind of. Anyways, that was fun. I like that.
A lot of people don't realize all the things that go into this, and that you get like one block at one stage of the process, and it hinders the output at the end. So it's interesting. I like this comment was right below the one pickup and trailer hotshot. The demand from our Middle East clients has been erratic. European suppliers are busy. This is from the support firms. European suppliers are busy and do not have bandwidth for small orders. We are seeing increased activity in the fourth quarter of 2021 from Trinidad, Europe, and Australia. So I thought that was an interesting comment.
Yeah. I do agree. The comments, they are funny.
They're the most interesting part.
They are insightful.
Hands down.
They are funny. They are a little probably more honest. They're probably more honest than the actual answers, because here they gotta they can really just rip into whatever they want because they're all anonymous. But to your point, you were talking about the questions. I changed the thing here. Let's see here. Oh yeah. Well, it's like 70 to 80% is either going to increase slightly or increase significantly their budget for this year.
Yeah.
And he said that was what, 400,000 barrels a day? Is that what he said?
The small firms.
Yeah.
The small firms are under 10,000 barrels a day.
No. The aggregate. Didn't he say the aggregate of these people? He said he thought was like 400,000 barrels a day.
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know. Ever since I discovered this, I always try to write. I did write a quick piece about it in investing.com last week, but I always try to glean some insights from it when it comes out, because it's not often that you get when the big firms like have their earnings calls, and you get snippets of what their you hear what Sheffield says and what Occidental says, but you don't really get it from the smaller ones, and so I think it's a really interesting window into what are their real issues. Like everyone's saying, like, oh no, it's not regulation, and then I read the survey and I was like, every other comment is about regulation and uncertainty. So if you're saying it's not politics, it kind of seems like it is.
Yeah, it definitely is. Okay, and then let's see here. Yeah. Here it was. From from the Dallas Fed survey.
Yeah.
Do you believe countries will be able to meet their commitments for 2030
Oh.
reducing greenhouse gas emissions? 95% said no.
Yeah.
It's almost one of those charts where it's like all no, also no.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I was like, no, but in blue.
Yes, no, but in blue, yes.
Because it's red. Red is no, and then yes is 5% yes is in blue. And I was like, is that yes or is that just no, but in blue?
No, but in blue. That's exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. Hey, they're honest. It's that's what I like about this survey.
But that we talked about this disconnect earlier, right? So here's a disconnect, which is you have this ESG, all these people talking about, but here's what people really think. People that are being honest. Now they can be wrong, you can be honest and wrong, but in an honest moment, they're like, no, this is not going to happen. So, okay.
I'd love to see a question about ESG. Actually, about something like that. Like, are you planning to incorporate ESG into your disclosures if you're a public company or something like that? I'd love to and then I'd love to see the comments on that one.
Yeah, the comments. I'd love to see the comments. So, okay, now you have a piece in investing.com that we'll link to as well. Kind of your comments on this, and so we'll link to that.
Exactly.
That real quick.
Oh yeah, sure. So so the piece looked at three. I looked at three kind of what I thought were some of the more important insights from the survey. A lot of which we mentioned, like production costs are going up, but I thought it was important to highlight that inflation is when people talk about inflation, they're always talking about energy prices causing inflation, but in this case, we're talking about inflation is acting on firms' ability to produce energy. So it goes both ways, and it's important to, I think, see inflation as actually something that could potentially put a floor on energy prices. Then I thought, again, that price forecasts were modestly higher, and that it's interesting to see how, the prices that they're using to do their budget. So they and then that can explain potentially why, if the price of oil is like 76, but all these companies are using 65 as their, is what they're saying their budget's at, well, then that's why they're not expanding at a level you might think they would if prices were at 70, prices are at 76 because they've set their budgets at a lower price. I thought that was an interesting thing to keep in mind, and maybe some of the financial firms should I don't know, maybe that's why they're saying we're going to have $100 Brent, because they're like, oh, well, these firms are just not going to produce. And then last thing was production growth being a priority, more for the small firms than for the big ones. And that could also mean that, we'll see less production than you think than you think is going to happen because of the dichotomy between large being over 10,000 barrels a day and small being under that amount. So maybe 50% of the firms are saying we want to increase production, but they're all producing such small amounts that even if they double their production, it's not going to make it that huge of a difference. So I thought those I thought were the most significant points here, and that basically to me says we're looking at fairly sluggish to maybe moderate growth in 2022. What was the last EIA? It was 11.6, 11.7 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't, how much higher are we going to get this year? Will we hit 12? I think we could definitely hit 12. But I don't know how much higher.
Well, we could hit 12. It's for how long? Maybe different discussion points. So. Anyways, okay. Well, where will you be this week, Dr. Wald?
That's a great question. Where will I be this week? I'll be on investing.com again.
Mm-hmm.
And I am working on a piece about some court arguments that have to do with climate change and holding energy companies, liable, which I'm not sure where that's coming out, but I'm working on it. It's, I don't know. I'm going to be tuning into the API 2022 State of American Energy on Wednesday at 11 a.m. just to see what they have to say. So I'm not speaking on it. I'm just,
just listening.
Yeah.
All right.
But that's an interesting event that's coming up.
Okay, so inside the war room, I had on Dr. Peter McCullough on last week, and that show did really good in the Philippines. So thank you, Philippines. I don't know why, but like it skyrocketed the charge of the Philippines. So if you want to hear his take on COVID, you can do that. I'll have on Mel Ayton this week. I got his book right here. I got the dust jacket right here. I'll get up. It's Protecting Presidential Candidates from JFK to Biden. It talks about the assassination attempts for presidential candidates. So if you like that, tune in. And with that, Dr. Wald will be back next week, right? We're back next week, yeah?
Yeah, next week.
Talk to everyone then.